whether or not you are watching on the Salem News Channel or listening to any of my radio outlets across the country, stay tuned because the big stories in Israel, where yesterday the Mossad or somebody exploded 3,000 pagers in Hezbollah headquarters and throughout the country. And in Israel, we are lucky to have North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who is visiting the Jewish state. He joins me by phone from Israel. Good morning, Governor Burgum. Thank you for being with me. What are you doing in Israel?
Well, good morning, Hugh. Here on a quick 3-day solidarity mission to show those in Israel that many of us in the United States are literally standing with them, and not just figuratively, but literally stand with Israel in Israel as we approach the October 7th anniversary. And of course, I feel in the context of elections back home, protests on college campuses, there's just so much misinformation and misunderstanding about what's going on in this country. And having this morning just toured a kibbutz where one of the atrocities was rained upon just a mile and a quarter from the Gaza border, and then also just left the Nova concert site were just unthinkable. I mean, I just, it's heartbreaking when you look at the pictures and the photos of memorials for 370 young people, to think that we've got young people on campuses protesting, the murder and slaughter of the kind of thing they probably would think they might be doing this weekend. So
nights ago, Governor, you've been traveling. A Jewish student at my alma mater, the University of Michigan, where I went to law school, was beaten for being a Jewish student. So it's begun again. It's extraordinary to me. I hope it doesn't go on at North Dakota State.
No, not happening in North Dakota for sure. But I tell you what, and you mentioned at the top of the hour, but with I think Americans are forgetting. They're focusing on Gaza. They're have a few sound bites, but this is a country that since October 7th last year has had close to 8,000 missiles launched at this country in the last year. And since this thing that went by in April, the April 14th, where Iran itself directly attacked Israel with hundreds and hundreds of missiles, and again, the United States, in partnership with others in the region, knocking down most of those, and then the current administration saying, "We'll call it a win." I mean, as opposed to saying, "No, we just got attacked." Not by one of the tentacles, but by the head of the whole octopus, which is Iran, who's funding all of this. And then, of course, talk to anybody in the U.S. Navy, and we've got restrictions and interruptions to our global supply chain in the Red Sea because of what the Houthis are doing. And we landed here on Monday, and the day before, they were blowing sirens at the Tel Aviv airport because a ballistic missile had come from Yemen. I mean, we're talking 1,000 kilometers away, aimed at the Tel Aviv airport. So this is there's a not just a conflict going on here. I guess people get semantics. They want to call it a war. But if you were living in the U.S. or Canada and somebody had rained down close to 8,000 rockets on you in the last year, I mean, since August, that's about one an hour if you spread it out. The 4,600 that have come since the April attack, we'd probably say we're at war. I mean, I don't know how. How you would think about that, or I would say, like, hey, we're in a conflict right now, and I think Americans and perhaps the Biden-Harris administration don't even fully understand that because they keep talking about restricting, sending weapons to Israel at a time when they need our full and unequivocal support. I mean, this is if people see the atrocities of what Hamas inflicted here, there would be a clear side of right and wrong, and who's on the right side from any moral authority in terms of this conflict.
Now, Governor Burgum, next hour I'm going to play a tape we've laid down of you and I talking about American energy, and we're going to talk about Israel in that context and their desalinization, their energy production, how Iran is being funded by us. But I want to focus in this first segment of the show on what happened yesterday. What do the Israelis tell you about what happened yesterday? Because it's on the front page of every newspaper in the United States. It's leading every broadcast because it's so remarkable that Israel can carry off, as is suspected, Mossad, an attack on 3,000 senior Hezbollah leaders in order to disable it, probably in anticipation of an invasion of Hezbollah-held Lebanon. What do you hear on the ground after one day about that remarkable operation?
Well, we had an opportunity to have some conversations with senior government officials last night, or coming tonight. This is certainly a topic here as well, and everyone's quite mum the word about who and exactly how from a confidentiality. But I think Hugh, you would understand this better than anyone. But to have that kind of precision, to be able to take out thousands of people precisely, because you're only wearing a Hezbollah pager if you're part of the Hezbollah command structure. And remarkably, of course, it's been reported that the Iranian ambassador, I put that in air quotes, was wearing a Hezbollah pager, because it certainly seems to me that if you're maybe you're not a diplomat, if you're actually wearing a terrorist group's pager and part of their command structure. So that that's again a remarkable thing. But I mean, this is the stuff that will go down in history. I mean, in all of this, could be the most successful counter-terrorist attack ever in terms of its precision of hitting the people you want to hit and having the least amount of collateral damage. I mean, it's just remarkable, and I again, when you think about all the the rockets that have been fired from the north into Israel, and the 100,000 people that have been displaced in Israel because of that, with the battles going on with Hezbollah from the north, which barely makes the paper at home because everyone's focused on Gaza and Hamas. But it's a remarkable thing, and I think it's a sea change, and certainly what a shock for these terrorist groups to understand that there's that level of precision, infiltration, and capability that exists.
Now, Governor Burgum, here at home, we have two very different candidates. You're close with President Trump, full-throated support for Israel, telling him to win the war. He'll support this operation. Vice President Harris says, oh, Israel has the right to defend itself, but it can't do what it's done in Gaza. We haven't heard anything yet about the pagers. She'll probably condemn that or not speak to it. Do you have a good sense of the difference the Israelis feel between Trump and Harris? Have you picked that up at all?
Well, certainly there's an understanding, but if you're a senior leader in Israel, as they say, you've got very few friends in the world right now. The United States is a friend, and you got to be a friend, whether it's your best friend, or which would be President Trump's administration, or your second best friend, which would be the U.S. with somebody else. But clearly they understand that there's two different futures for them after next January 20th and after this election. Because, as you said, I mean, Harris doesn't even put a comma in the sense, I support Israel, but I don't think that they should, receive 2,000-pound bombs. I mean, she's putting conditions on the relationship all the time. When she says, hey, when she says ceasefire, all that Hamas and Iran hear is, there's pressure on Israel to surrender. And so I've said this on your show, maybe I've said it on others a year ago, but I feel like they keep negotiating for the terrorists on behalf of the terrorists. Unless you're putting maximum pressure on Iran and full support for Israel, if you're doing the opposite, if you're putting conditions on Israel and trying to create space for Hamas to exist, then you're negotiating. That's the position they want. You're negotiating for the terrorists as opposed to for our allies.
True. Now, Governor, to close off our first segment, you're a good friend with President Trump. I only interview him or moderate debates with him. I've only had one private meeting with him in my entire life, but you know him very well. How did the second assassination attempt impact you? Because it just seems to me the man is a target because the left has fired hate. We have 1 minute to our break.
Well, I think, again, if you Joe Biden and now Kamala Harris are running on a couple of themes, and one of those themes was that President Trump is a threat to democracy. If you say that 1,000 times, put it in ads, repeat it over and over again, then you're going to have followers that believe they're going to be heroes if they can take them out. And I think it's there's political violence, and then there's violence in language, and I think those kinds of words, which against someone who is supporting the rights of states and supports democracy, unthinkable.
I'm going to come back with Governor Burgum in the next hour with a piece on energy that I take again this morning with him at like 5 o'clock in the morning. So don't miss next hour. Doug Burgum, Governor of North Dakota in Israel. Thank you, Governor. Dwayne's World's got to drop today because Kamala Harris gave the most inane word salad presentation at the National Association of Black Journalists yesterday. And Generalissimo, I do not have time today to get through all that. Are you going to cover it on a Dwayne's World?
Oh, boy, am I going to cover that today. You bet I'm going to cover it.
Okay, what is the worst thing she said?
The worst thing she'd said is, from my perspective, probably the worst thing she said was, we support Israel, but I'm all for withholding 2,000-pound bombs and withholding weapon sales. So, I said a clever anti-Semite would tell you that, oh, sure, we're going to support Israel, but then they stab Israel in the back. She's actually kind of taken it a different way. She's saying, well, we have Israel's back, but then she's stabbing him in the chest. I mean, it's just backwards.
All right, I will listen to Dwayne's World today because I have not heard the National Association of Black Journalists. Dwayne gave me, I don't know,
11
cuts.
11 cuts from that.
Okay, and there's lots of other stuff.
We're not here to take anyone's guns, but we need an assault weapons ban. She
right, and I gotta play.
Sentence.
I gotta play all sorts of stuff, and I will all throughout the show. So keep watching the Salem News Channel and listen to Dwayne's World for that. Pay attention. Tom Barrett could be a great congressman from Michigan's 7th District. And I have to talk to these people from that state up north because even we Buckeyes want Republicans to win in Michigan. Good morning, Tom Barrett. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning, Hugh. How are you? And thank you for having me on, despite our border differences between Michigan and Ohio.
Yeah, we won the Michigan-Ohio War, which is little known part, but unfortunately we got Toledo out of it. And so, Tom Barrett, you joined the Army out of high school and were a helicopter guy. Would you tell people about your journey and how the GI Bill put you through college then?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you again for having me on. As you said, I joined the Army right out of high school, took the very first airplane ride of my life to basic training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. By Christmas Eve of the year I graduated high school, I had landed in my first duty assignment in South Korea. I was there when 9/11 happened, and of course that changed the trajectory of not just the United States, but for me personally, my career in the Army. Decided to stay in. Did a deployment after that in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. I was a block sergeant guarding the Taliban and Al-Qaeda detainees there. Then did a deployment in Iraq, and then was selected to go to flight school. Learned to fly some amazing helicopters there at Fort Rucker, Alabama. Along the way, used the GI Bill to put myself through college at Western Michigan University and met my wife. We now live in Charlotte, Michigan, a small town not far from Lansing, raising our 4 kids here in Michigan, and want the opportunity to go to Congress and really represent families like mine that feel we don't have a voice in Washington, D.C. right now.
Tom, I'm going to spend time on the serious stuff, but I do want to point out that the Ohio State Buckeyes had fun with your alma mater 2 weeks ago. Just wanted to say that. I don't know if you went to that game.
They did. I think Western Michigan got a paycheck out of it, but yeah,
Yep.
it was not a good game for Western Michigan.
A new swimming pool or something for WMU. Tom Barrett, is this race winnable? The 7th is, I don't know what the RD split is. Is it winnable?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just winnable. It is ranked as the most competitive and consequential congressional race on the entire map in America this year. Cook ranks it as a R+2. The Cook Political Report ranks it as an R+2 district. So we know it starts with a very, limited, but perhaps very marginal Republican advantage just in the base numbers. But then from there, you look at the other factors that are going on right now. The top of the ticket dynamics here in Michigan being a swing state, the United States Senate race here in Michigan that is very competitive. And then this congressional district ranks as the most competitive in America. It's an open seat this year, no incumbent running. Every poll that's been done since March of this year has had me with a lead. We don't take anything for granted, and we don't take polling for granted. But I do think that the consensus of the polling shows that we're ahead in this race. We've got just under 7 weeks to go. My opponent is spending millions of dollars in scorched earth, negative campaigning right now. We just need to hang on to the reins, get our message out to voters over the next, just under 7 weeks. And I'm confident that we're going to win this race on election day.
Tom, I'm curious, not the specifics, but how do they go after a 22-year veteran of the Army who flew helicopters in Iraq and served at Gitmo and was in South Korea on 9/11? I mean, how do they go after a veteran from combat zones?
Well, they want to attack me because I have the values that a lot of your listeners have and a lot of your viewers have, values that we all want to see returned back to the United States into our good system of governance. We have a cost of living that is far too high, and they want to distract people away from that. We have a border that is wide open with more than 10 million illegal border crossings under Joe Biden, and they want to distract away from that. We've had crisis after crisis. We have crime afflicting our communities. Lansing, Michigan is the central geographic city in this district and ranks as one of the 20 most violent cities in America right now. They don't want to talk about those things because
Lansing?
they want to distract voters. Lansing, Michigan is now one of the 20 most violent cities in America today. This is a big problem. It's the central geographic city in the district where I'm running. We live in a community not far from there, and I know people who live in the city of Lansing who are very, very frustrated and concerned about this. It is a real threat and a real problem. We also have national security threats. You pointed out my background in the Army. 22 years since I was a teenager until, not very long ago. My career spanned the entire 20-year-long war on terror, and they don't want to talk about those things and the national security threats that we're facing from China and Iran and other adversaries of the United States who are sending people now across our southern border who are going to plot their next attack in the United States while residing in a sanctuary city under the protection of Democratic leaders. These are real problems we have to confront. And
Oh, yeah, but Tom, I'm really surprised, Tom Barrett, because my older brother, who I call Mycroft, got his PhD from Michigan State. I got my law degree from the University of Michigan. We Hewitts tend to treat Michigan like the Vikings treated England. Go get what you want and leave. But the idea that Lansing is in the top 10, I'm so stunned. I know it's not East Lansing. I'm just kind of stunned by that. Tell me about the money. Do the $25, $50, and $100 small donors matter to you, and what the website is that they can go to?
Absolutely. Every single dollar allows us to get ads up that we can, contact persuadable voters, that we can go out and do door-to-door and direct mail and all of the above, radio, television, and the other things that we need to do to win this campaign. People can go to my website, tombarrettforcongress.com. You can, there's a donate link right on there. You can also read a little bit more about my background and see my 4 pillars. I call it my 4 pillars of security that we need to focus on to win this race and put our country back on the right track. National security, border security, economic security, and neighborhood security. Those are the 4 issues that we are focusing on this campaign. And I think that's the winning ticket to get over the finish line.
Well, the reason you're on is because the NRCC gave me a list of people where you've actually got Republicans who can win seats that are crucial. You're on their list, so they'll be providing Overwatch, but it's still a ground game, right? You still have to get poor Mrs. Barrett and your kids. I'm sure they're involved in this. Did they sign up for this? They signed up for deployments and all that, but what about this?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is a family effort to do this. And I look at it as, surely this is a sacrifice for my family, but it's a sacrifice worth making. And it has a purpose and a reason behind it. I'm fortunate that I've had a purpose in my life behind what I've done, through the Army and in other parts of my life. And I want to continue that purpose by going to Washington, D.C. to, as I said, represent families like mine from right here in mid-Michigan that feel we've been left behind and ignored in Washington and the policymakers right now, and to put America back where we need to so that my 4 kids have an opportunity as they grow older to have the same opportunities in life that I did, instead of less opportunities, as we're, increasingly frustrated to find is that we're, young people are getting left behind now. So yes, it is a sacrifice, but it's one that we're willing to make because it's for the right reasons.
Tom Barrett, 2 R's, 2 T's, for forcongress.com. One last question, Tom. When Vice President Harris said during the debate that there are no Americans in combat zones, what was your reaction?
I was disgusted to hear her say that. We just had American troops under attack in Iraq. We have war, between Israel and Hamas going on, and they are retaliating against American troops abroad. There is a high threat in the world going on right now. We have to confront our adversaries, and we absolutely should not mislead people as to the seriousness of what is going on abroad. It is the same way that this administration lied to us and said that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was a great success. We simply can't trust these people.
Tom Barrett, thank you for joining me again. Tom Barrett, BARRETTFOR Congress.com. Help him out. He can win. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
I want to
Hugh.
go back
Thank
and
you.
remind people I'm going to Michigan on the Talkers Tour, Battleground Talkers Tour. I'm going to go up to Detroit. And if you go to battlegroundtour.com, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you see the banner, but just remember battlegroundtour.com. Go there. I want to finish what I began, Project 2025. It's what the Heritage Foundation does every time there's going to be a change in administration. A Republican might come in. They gather the greatest conservative scholars. They don't all agree. They put their ideas together. They put together the names and the resumes of everyone who might want to serve, and they give it to the incoming president, in this case Trump, if he wins, and they pick and choose from among it. It's not Donald Trump's project. It's Heritage Project. Kevin Roberts came on this show and explained it. And for the second time today, I'm going to tell you, go to 25truth.com, because I see it everywhere in every Democratic ad. They're swamping Maine with ads that also hit New Hampshire, I assume. Maybe they're worried about Maine and the second district, because Maine has, they cast their electoral votes congressional district by congressional district. Only Nebraska and Maine do that, but Maine does. So maybe that's why Harris has ads up here. But all those ads mention Project 2025. Get the truth, 25truth.com. Mary Catherine Ham joins me, the host of Getting Hammered. You can follow her on X at MKHammer. Mary Catherine, the Travis Manion 9/11 Heroes Run is coming up, and that's 911heroesrun.com. I did a 10K yesterday. It wasn't a Travis Manion one, and I was walking, not running yesterday. Where are you running this weekend?
I am running in Oakton, Virginia. That's September 22nd at 8 a.m. And we will have a great time. Sign up at 911heroesrun.com. And there are runs still happening all through September. So join us. You have a good old time. It'll lift your spirits in sort of a rough news cycle.
It is a very rough news cycle. Let me begin by showing you something, Mary Catherine, that on one of my trundles last week I saw and took a picture of. And if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see it. How would you describe that, Mary Catherine? It's a sign for Harris Waltz.
It looks like a homemade greeting card that you would sell at the farmer's market. And it has a cat stretching on it and some cutesy font. And it says, "Not going back."
You're not old enough to realize this is 1968 graphics. This is Flower Power, Flower Child graphics. And
well, that's why you'd see it at the farmer's market. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm quite certain that everyone who's alive that voted for George McGovern is going to vote for Kamala Harris. That's the Harris Waltz poster that I took a picture of, because it's so funny. It's just so funny. Here's something that's not funny. Kamala Harris last night at the National Association of Black Journalists, cut 21.
Do you have full confidence in the Secret Service to protect all of you?
I do.
You feel safe, you and your family?
I do. But, I mean, you can go back to Ohio. Not everybody has Secret Service. And there are far too many people in our country right now who are not feeling safe. I mean, I look at Project 2025 and
Stop right there. What do you think of that answer up to that point?
That is a disgusting and appalling answer. I believe I listened to the whole answer yesterday, and to my knowledge, she barely references the fact that Donald Trump is in fact the one who is not safe. The one who is running for president, who is demonstrably not safe, is Donald Trump. I'm glad she feels safe. That's great. She has not had 2 assassination attempts on her life, and that's Wonderful. We are blessed that the
Nor
two
would
didn't
we
work
want
out
that
on Donald Trump.
ever.
Yeah, this is wild to me that Democrats can't have, and media, but I repeat myself, can't have the basic decency to even pretend at this point that they are concerned that Republicans are being shot, because their idea is, frankly, what we say and do is good, what you say and do is bad, anything you do is bad, and in fact might cause you to be shot. And hey, y'all probably shouldn't have acted that way. Y'all probably shouldn't have said the things you believe. This is what they actually believe, and it leads them to not even acknowledge the tragedy of this event and the fact that it could throw our country into an absolute tailspin if this was successful. It's disgusting.
It
Nothing
would.
makes me madder than this news cycle.
I lived through 1968. I remember my hero at the time as a 12-year-old was Bobby Kennedy getting killed, Martin Luther King getting killed 2 months before that. It is so traumatic. I remember Kennedy getting killed. I was in first grade. And it's just so bad for the country that the treatment of it is astonishing. Mary Catherine, I do want to dial in on causation. Charles C.W. Cook, one of the people I listen to on podcasts like you and Vic Mattis on Getting Hammered, Charles C.W. Cook is often on the editors. He and I are on the same page. Causation means proximate cause, legal cause. The only person who caused the assassination attempts on Donald Trump legally are the shooters. I'm not one of these people who want to trace it to Joy Reid or anybody else. I think that's nuts, and it's against the First Amendment. But honestly, let's have one standard. If we're going to apply one standard to Republicans, it's got to be one standard for Democrats, right?
Yes. So my line has always been, because I care about speech and I don't want to chill other people's speech, I'm not going to blame your political speech or for every nutbag that comes along. Okay? But here's the deal. You can't lecture me while I'm keeping my rhetoric responsible for my entire career and standing up for the fact that other people should be able to speak freely. You can't lecture me about how we need to bring the temperature down when you've been the ones very notably not bringing the temperature down for years. It is embarrassing to watch them change their values on a dime during a TV segment. So they will say, clearly Trump brought this on himself with his rhetoric, right? And then as soon as Trump says, your rhetoric might have had something to do with this, in the same segment, they'll say, that rhetoric's the problem. Our rhetoric is never, ever a problem. And by the way, Republicans, please behave better. I mean, it's infuriating.
Mary Catherine, I'm very concerned about this election. I'm not concerned about the end of the Constitution. The Constitution is very strong. The Republic is very strong. But Kamala Harris she hadn't got a thought in her head. She's vapid. And she will not take Chinese communists seriously, and we will not maintain our pacing with the CCP. That's my number one concern. My second concern is Israel's going to find itself abandoned. How concerned are you about 4 years of Kamala Harris?
I'm pretty concerned. I think she doesn't have real thoughts, and to the extent that she is going to have policies, they're going to be sort of default California lefty bad instincts. She clearly doesn't have the ability even to answer a basic question with, hey, I'm sorry that my opponent was shot and I'm really glad he's still alive. But she's just not capable of much. So that concerns me because I don't know who will be in charge, much like we don't know who's in charge now. Divided government will help. As you may have noticed, the press will not hold her accountable. There was not even one question on China, your number one concern and one of our number one geopolitical concerns, at the debate. And on Israel, I believe in that NABJ interview. It's nice to see her finally taking questions, I guess. I believe she said she'd be comfortable with limiting weapons to Israel. So we should be concerned about those things. Her instincts are bad. Her skills are basically non-existent. And I do not believe she has the ability to push back on whatever committee ends up running the country.
Here is what she said about Israel at the NABJ, cut number 30. It's a minute 38, Mary Catherine, but let's let the audience hear it.
Is there a specific policy change that you, as president of the United States, would say you would do that would help this along? Because you've gotten a lot of credit for emphasizing the humanity of Palestinians. But what I often hear from folks is that there's no policy change that either you or President Biden have gone and said they would do. Is there a specific policy change as president that you would do in our helping of Israel?
We need to get this deal done. and we need to get it done immediately. And that is my position, and that is my policy. We need to get this deal done.
But in the way that we send weapons, in the way that we interact as their ally, are there specific policy changes?
Well, Eugene, for example, one of the things that we have done that I am entirely supportive of is the pause that we've put on the 2,000-pound bombs. And so there is some leverage that we have had and used. But ultimately, the thing that is going to unlock everything else in that region is getting this deal done. And I'm not going to disclose private conversations, but I will tell you I've had direct conversations with the Prime Minister, with the President of Israel, with Egyptian leaders, and with our allies. And I think we've made ourselves very clear this deal needs to get done in the best interest of everyone in the region, including getting those hostages out who, I mean, we saw the latest example of what happened with the six most recently, one of whom was an American citizen.
Well, Mary Catherine, she's like a bad jukebox with only 6 records, none of which are good. And this, we got to get a deal done, is one of them. What do we do about it? I mean, she only gets interviewed by people who don't know how to do interviews.
Yeah, no, she's so deeply unimpressive. I joked last night, my children were like, "What's for dinner?" And I was like, "Well, I come from a middle-class family." Because she doesn't address questions, right? And no one who's interviewing her is willing. You can tell they're trying to help her. They can tell they know she's not answering this question when she starts answering. So they're sort of helping her along and giving her a little bit of Cliff's Notes. I don't think she really understands the situation. I don't think she's studied the maps, as she famously said. They're stuck on this idea of a 2-state solution, which even when you talk to the most like peace activist Israelis go, like, that's been set back for at least a generation by October 7th. Like, let's live in reality. When they talk about a deal that's to be made, it's Hamas who's rejecting the deals. And Hamas is partly rejecting the deals because they don't have a lot to deal with, because unfortunately, as they've not been checked on by the international community or Red Cross, they have eliminated a lot of the hostages that are there, right? So they don't have what it takes to make a deal. And Israel wants to preserve the right to its own existence, which requires allowing them to fight and not saying that we're just going to give up.
So a quick exit question, Mary Catherine. Do you think 3,000 exploding pagers in Hezbollah pockets is going to advance a deal? Or I mean, there is no deal. There's a war. There's a 2-front war, a 7-front war. Israel struck a blow. I don't know when she gave the NABJ, but that had to have been known by the time she did that interview that the pagers were exploding in Hezbollah pockets.
Well, I think what she doesn't understand, what Democrats generally don't understand, is that strength can actually end a war, right? If you win the war can end. And what Israel is doing is signaling through all these counterintelligence, counterterrorism operations, especially this very sophisticated one. We know where you are, Iranian proxies, and we will do this to you, instead of what America's been doing, which is we will give you pallets of cash. Can we help you with anything, Iran? And so I think the message being sent by Israel is the correct one that could get you to a peaceful resolution of a war once they have won the war. But they cannot just stop fighting. That is not how it ends.
Last question. She said there were no Americans in combat. I'll talk to Mike Waltz about that today. I'm still angry about that because I've got family on the Lincoln. They're under attack by the Houthis. I don't know if the Lincoln has been, but American sailors are. We got soldiers under attack in Iraq in the last 2 weeks. We had 3 killed in Jordan. Do you think she doesn't know? I mean, is she ignorant of that, or she just lied in the debate?
I think she doesn't know. And I think the fact that she doesn't know means that she lives in a bubble and she is ignorant to a ridiculous degree about the challenges that military families face and what geopolitics actually looks like. Because as you note, we've had 3 guardsmen in Jordan and 2 Navy SEALs die just in January of this year. I don't know how that slipped her mind, but it slipped Biden's mind that the 13 died at the Abbey Gate when he said at the debate that no one has died on his watch. They have demonstrated almost sociopathic lack of concern for Gold Star families and for military all across the world. And they just get credit for being empathetic because they are Democrats. But this line that they keep using is really, really disrespectful to actual people who are doing the work and who have lost loved ones.
On that note, on that very sober note, thank you, Mary Catherine. I look forward to the next edition of Getting Hammered. And to everyone who's listening to the podcast, go to 911heroesrun.com, sign up for a run in your area, 911heroesrun.com, and Getting Hammered. Follow and like it. Follow and like it. Thank you, Mary Catherine.
Thank you.
Joined by Akash Chogali. Akash is the Vice President of Americans for Prosperity. He's almost on with me every week. He wears a different hoodie. He's sort of like Mark Zuckerberg of the Beltway. Akash, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Good to be back with you.
Good to be back with you. AFP is a great sponsors of ours. And I'm glad because I want you to go to americansforprosperity.com/volunteer and get on the ground in Virginia, get on the ground in Pennsylvania where voting has begun. Akash, you have operations in both Pennsylvania and Virginia?
We absolutely do. Those are two of our biggest states. We've been in there for almost 20 years. And in Pennsylvania, Hugh, we are looking to knock 4 million doors, 4 million voter contacts before Election Day. Could use the help from the people watching and listening to your show.
So thank you very much for that. It's great news. Now I want to go to Kamala Harris in front of the National Association of Black Journalists on Monday night, I believe. She said a couple things about the economy, some of which I don't understand. Let's play first cut number 26.
It is sadly the state of affairs in our country that working people often have to decide to either be able to work or be able to afford childcare. Like they can't afford childcare and actually do the work that they want to do because it's too expensive and it doesn't actually level out.
Then let's add cut 31.
And it is just absolutely too expensive for them to be able to work and do that. So my plan is not only about 7% of income for working people for childcare, but also we need to do better for our childcare providers and our healthcare providers in terms of ensuring that they receive the wages that they deserve based on the dignity of their work.
All right, Akash, what is the 7% that she's talking about? And then what do we say in response, or AFP say in response to the child care crisis rhetoric, which I've been hearing in California for 30 years?
Absolutely. So let me start with the fact that this is a very important issue. This is important not only because it's politically salient, because it's a real problem, it's also a real problem that we need to address, Hugh. But one, that 7% cap, again, it's just another example of democratic price controls that we have seen fail in industry after industry, country after country in the course of human history. Now, when it comes to childcare, it's important to know the context here. This administration, with Kamala Harris as vice president, has reduced the availability of childcare options available to American families by attacking, for example, the au pair program. I'm sure many of the people who listen to your show have au pairs from other countries in their home. This administration has gone out of its way to over-regulate the au pair industry, try to keep it out of this country, out of business because of union competition, essentially. There's a lot of coverage from the Wall Street Journal about this. This is something that families are very, very upset about. Now, when it comes to the cost of childcare, again, I agree this is a very, very important thing. The number one thing we can do here is increase the amount of competition in the childcare space, right? Whether that's home childcare, family provided childcare, daycare facilities, things like that. It is far, far too heavily regulated. People don't have enough choices. We can maintain, obviously, Hugh, basic standards of health, safety, and security for our small children while injecting much needed competition into the space. This administration has gone out of its way not only to do the opposite, but to raise costs across the board on families, which of course exacerbates this and many other affordability problems.
So, Akash, I don't have any idea what the 7% refers to. I mean, what is she talking about?
So she wants a price cap on childcare based on a family's income. That is obviously an asinine, completely unworkable standard. How do you expect a home daycare facility? Yes, how do you expect a home daycare facility with literally one employee to know what every family's income is, make sure they're not paying more than they're supposed to, involving the federal bureaucracy? I'm sure state governments get involved. These price control schemes never work to actually control prices, and of course, they're completely unworkable in probably millions of different forms of childcare facilities across.
So, Akash, I want to understand this. I have a granddaughter who goes to daycare 4 days a week. Are they saying that is Kamala Harris advocating a policy that you cannot charge a child more than 7% of their family income? Because the immediate result of that will be to end childcare for the lower income people. They'll just take higher income people.
It's like a bad infomercial, Hugh, and yet it gets worse, which was the second part that you played, which is that she also wants to significantly raise the minimum wages for childcare providers. And so you're going to cap the amount that people pay while raising wages for providers. Guess who's going to be left holding the bag for that? Of course, it's the taxpayers. And again, not just the wealthy. This is another kind of democratic socialist scheme that trickles down, and the middle class, lower income people, anyone who pays taxes will end up footing the bill for this and increasing the cost of living at a time we can least afford.
You know, Akash, I'm not an economist. I took Ec 10 in college, and that's about it. But I know what I don't know, and I know what I know. I know this doesn't work. This is nuts. Where do you think they come up with these ideas?
It's political vote buying. I mean, think about it. On one hand, you have Republicans running on extending broad-based tax cuts that cut taxes for 80% of American families. On the other hand, you have Kamala Harris and Democrats running on these targeted tax credits, carve-outs, subsidies, things like that. She calls these a tax cut, but they're not. They're spending from the tax code to try to buy votes from specific constituencies. It's a terrible way to govern. It's terrible tax policy. And most importantly, it doesn't actually work to make life easier for families.
All right, now I got to ask you about unrealized capital gains tax. Akash, you're our go-to guy on economics. I know if they tax unrealized capital gains, I have to sell what I've held for 30 years in order to pay that. I don't want to sell any assets. The way the tax code presently works is basis steps up on the death of the second spouse and your heirs get it. But if anyone's got anything, a house that's appreciated, a stock that's appreciated, this is a nightmare. Do they really mean tax unappreciated gains? I mean, unrealized gains.
They do. And let's start with, again, Hugh, this is unconstitutional. There is absolutely no basis in the Constitution to implement this kind of tax. This is not income. It's an increase in value, which in a time like now where inflation has been high would be exponential, right? It's growing very, very quickly because of inflation, but because that value is not cash value, people would have to sell assets just to pay this tax. Now, Democrats will come back and say, oh, it only applies above $100 million. There's two key responses to that. One, think of things that are above $100 million, right? Think of the largest, most innovative, some of the greatest companies that have ever existed in the history of mankind were started in garages and people's homes here in America. You're going to force the CEOs and the founders of those companies to sell off those assets. By nature, you are going to inhibit the growth of some of the greatest and biggest companies in the world that employ hundreds of thousands of Americans. The second is, as you know, Hugh, taxes never stay where they are supposed to. Of course, if this is implemented, it will gradually expand until it's eating into the wealth of the middle class. Again, nothing more than a class warfare wealth redistribution scheme that will not pay for anything they've promised, and two, ultimately will do nothing to increase opportunity or affordability for the middle class.
Last question, Akash. I was listening to the Ruthless podcast yesterday. Stephen Moore was their guest. He has a new book out called The Trump Economic Miracle. If the tax cuts that Trump put in 2017 expire, Americans are going to get hit with a tax increase they have no idea the size of. Is AFP out there telling people about that?
I'm glad you asked, Hugh. We have done 400 meetings on Capitol Hill with staff and members of Congress, every single Republican office, many Democratic offices. We have events all year going on separate from the political stuff. That is our number one priority next year, is to extend and build on the 2017 TCJA, because we can do more to simplify our tax code, and the American people do not want to face a tax hike next year if those were allowed to expire.
No, Akash, I don't know the answer to this. Do the Trump tax cuts cover 2025 and do they only expire on 2026 income, or do they apply to, if they expire, do they apply to 2025 income?
No, that's correct. So those provisions expire on December 31st of 2025. So it would cover 2025 income. But Hugh, that's not a fight we can afford to waste until October, November, December of next year. You know how this crisis governing works. It never ends well. It's something we need to tackle, I believe, in the first 100 days to make sure the American people do not face a cost of living tax.
Or they'll start,
percent of families.
they'll start selling assets in 2024 if they're going to be taxed higher in 2025, won't they?
Yep, that's right.
Gosh, what a nightmare this is on every front. Akash Chogali, good to see you. Americans for Prosperity.org/volunteer. I was listening late last night, too late. The commentary podcast dropped too late. It's part of my show prep. John Podhoretz made a point I want you to hear. Cut number 20. It was near the end of the podcast yesterday, and J-Pod is one of the smartest people in the United States. He said this about Harris.
It is September 17th. The election is not till November 5th. She can't say the same things this way. Now, if she were talking policy, I think she kind of could. Like George W. Bush in 2000 focused on 4 major policy items, but they were substantive discussion points that he was trying to put over, saying, if I'm president, here's how I'm going to be different, particularly on education. I have this plan with this thing, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. It's no child left behind, and we're going to have standards, and we're going to have testing, and we're going to blah, 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 right? So that was substantive, but focused. This is, you know my values, and at some point, it's like, what values do we know? I don't know what her values are. What does that even mean? What does it even mean that she has values?
She wants to get us back to where the values of the American people really lie. That's the
which
line.
Are the values of the
Yes.
Her values are the values of
really
valuing values of valuations. I don't know. I know. That's why, yes, I think there will be more debates. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there are going to be more debates, by the way, unless it's with Fox, because we can't have another setup ambush of Trump. Brett Baer and Martha McCollum will be fair. They're the only fair 2 left in the business. I don't trust anybody else. Martha McCollum yesterday had on Fox News pollster Lee Carter. I want you to hear this as well. Cut number 36.
I found this fascinating. Trump is leading with Hispanic voters by 8% in Pennsylvania. And I don't think we've ever seen a Republican beating the Democrat. Usually it's, how much are they eroding the lead of Hispanic voters? But he's ahead with Hispanic voters in Pennsylvania. I don't know how large, of a voter group that is in Pennsylvania.
It's a really interesting trend that we're starting to see. More and more Hispanic voters are going for Donald Trump. In many ways, what I've heard from them, and we had a couple voters in our focus groups who were talking about how unfair the immigration system seems to be, that they came in the right way and people are coming in the wrong way, that for them to come to America, it was about opportunity and not handouts. Now they feel like people are coming in, opening up their hands and getting free iPhones, free places to stay, and it just isn't the American dream that they felt was created for them, and that's not what they want to see happening to America. And so I think you might be seeing that play out a little bit in these polls.
A little bit. An 8% lead for Donald Trump among Hispanic voters in Pennsylvania means he's won Pennsylvania. And you know what they're upset about? They are not racist, the Latinos or the whites or the blacks of Pennsylvania. Haitians have arrived in large numbers in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and they speak French. And you know what happens when you put French-speaking people into elementary and junior high and high school? You have to have interpreters. It's an enormous drain on school budgets. It's not racism. They're just wondering, how do we pay for this? What is wrong with Kamala Harris that she does not understand this? If you're watching on Salem News Channel, you'll see this picture. I'm going to put up a Harris Walz poster that I saw. And I just stopped, took a photo of it. I'm not voting for Harris and Walz. I'm voting for Trump. But this poster is a 1972 style, hippie style Paris Wall's not going back. It's a cat and flowers in 2024. It's just, I thought, oh, McGovernite, crunchy person. Every McGovern voter from 1972, those who are still alive, I couldn't vote in 72, but those who are still, they're going to vote for Harris if they voted for McGovern. But my goodness. Governor Doug Burgum joined me to open the show today, but before that, I was able to tape a piece with him about American energy this morning. He's in Israel. Governor, I wanted to read to you the draft of a column which will come out in Fox tomorrow, one paragraph. It reads, "Energy is freedom" is one of my favorite sayings, not only because it is true, from putting gas in your car to driving revenues to the U.S. Treasury, revenues which depend heavily on American productivity, which is built on the cost of energy. The only way to really bring down prices is to bring down the cost of their production, the cost of their transportation to market. The U.S. must absolutely drill, baby, drill, but also throw everything at the new generation of nuclear power plants and the export of liquefied natural gas. AI depends upon it. Supercomputing depends upon it. Trump is committed to all of the above. Harris in 2019 was absolutely against fracking and has lied about her being the tie-breaking vote to allow fracking, the bill she refers to, had provisions on offshore oil leases not fracking. We know Harris's values have not changed from her own mouth, and that she is a disciple of the climate change crisis and all the deindustrialization that comes with it, whether intended or not. We have to produce domestic energy at 2 to 4 times our current total output. Do you agree with all or any of that, Governor Burgum?
I agree with it, and if I was editing what you just wrote, I wouldn't have changed a word because maybe I would have added a few exclamation marks in there as well. Because again, you mentioned the AI. I mean, we're in an arms race with China. China's opening up 2 more baseload power plants a month or more. They're the world's largest polluter. All these plants they're opening up are coal plants, 400 gigawatts. The United States, under Biden and now Harris, are trying to shut down our baseload. They're destabilizing our grid at a time when we need more electricity than ever, and not for electric cars because we can decarbonize liquid fuels. We're doing that in North Dakota, but we need electricity to power computing in this country because it's going to be essential to defense. It's essential to healthcare. It's essential to everything we're doing, and I don't think they fully understand that. It's one of the reasons you're seeing Silicon Valley come over for President Trump is because they know they can't sustain the market caps of those companies unless we've got the electricity to drive the next generation of computing in this world and maintain our lead.
Governor Burgum, you're in Israel, and obviously Iran is Israel's greatest threat. I think the United States is funding Iran by allowing them to export oil and therefore funding the war against Israel on 7 fronts. Do you see it that way, or is it a different problem set?
No, it's 100%. You couldn't be more right. With not enforcing the sanctions was one thing because now they've got Iran's production is up, and of course, who are they selling most of that to? They're selling it to China. So not only are we funding a war here, we're also support China, the world's largest importer of oil and gas. China is increasing their strategic petroleum reserve at a time when they're getting ready for World War III. Joe Biden and Harris, they drained ours in half ahead of the midterms to get a few votes, and then of course as you noted, I mean they by executive order, Biden and Harris shut down natural gas export production for new facilities to help support our allies around the world. They shut down production in Alaska, which could help Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. So their anti-U.S. energy policy is bad for the environment. It's funding dictatorships abroad. It's helping Putin. It's helping Venezuela, helping Iran. Iran is the world's largest funder of terrorism. You're absolutely 100% right, Hugh.
Have you had a chance on this trip, Governor Burgum, to visit the desalination plants that not just Israel, but Saudi Arabia, the UAE, others use? Because they take a lot of power, but they got to have the water. We don't do that in this country.
No, we're blessed in the United States with massive amounts of fresh water among all the other natural resources we have. But absolutely, power generation here is key, and energy security is key. And you mentioned nuclear. That's something again we got to put the pedal on. Something that they need to hear. But again, with the Abraham Accords and other things that move forward under Trump, you could envision a world where, Saudi Arabia and Israel and others, all collaborating, going along, where we could have energy security for Israel right here in right here in this region. But right now, the policies that are happening are, like I said, they're funding terrorism, and Hezbollah is, the estimates I'm hearing here on the ground is that they could have 10 times the resources in terms of rockets, men, people, capability than Hamas did. I mean, they're one of the premier recipients of funding from Iran, but it's not just the oil money because of the lack of sanctions. I mean, let's remember when the Biden-Harris, they paid $6 billion for 5 hostages, and when that happened, I said, "Wow, we're going to have more hostage taking." Less than a month later, October 7th, over 250 hostages. Because we made it a more profitable business for terrorist groups to take hostages. After that, unfreezing the assets of Iran over and over and over again, like $100 billion worth. President Trump had that all shut down. He had the sanctions working. He had that country on their knees financially, and they couldn't fund the 7-front war that they're doing right now against Israel.
The oldest rule in the book is that which gets rewarded gets repeated. We paid for hostages. More hostages get taken. Gilead Shalit was kidnapped by Hamas years ago. Now they've taken 250 people, many of them Americans. Governor, before I let you go, you're a Silicon Valley guy before you went back to North Dakota. And so you know those folks. I don't know if Elon's your friend or not, but former President Trump said he's going to make Musk the head of an efficiency commission. That's great, but I also know we just have to shrink the federal government and consolidate. In the production of energy, just to be specific, the Department of Interior is actually more important than the Department of Energy when it comes to the production of energy. But the Department of Interior, the Department of Energy, the EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Forest Service, which is in the Agriculture Department for some reason, they all have a lot to do with energy. Have you talked about upping our energy production across all these agencies with President Trump?
Yes, and I have, and with his team, they understand that, and I can share the perspective from North Dakota. We're engaged in over 30 legal fights with the federal government across all the agencies you mentioned. You can throw in a few more: Bureau of Indian Affairs that are affecting our tribal energy production, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Go on and on and on. It's been a whole of government approach by the Biden-Harris administration to shut down and restrict U.S. energy and U.S. Critical mineral production, which we need if we're going to be competing in a world where we need, critical minerals for batteries and for other advanced electronics, for cell phones. They're shutting down access to the 240 million acres of land. It's not federal land, it's public land. It's land that belongs to the people. Theodore Roosevelt put it away for the benefit and the use of the American public. He didn't set it aside so no one would ever set foot or develop it. He said development needs to be as much about, the land needs to be as much about development as it means about preservation. He saw it as that we could do both, sustainable development. The original conservationist, the Department of Energy today is not one of those groups that we're suing. The Department of Energy is running around throwing out, massive grants in swing states, trying to, influence Senate elections and other things. I mean, they got a grant budget coming out of this legislation that they passed that's bigger than the agency's former budget. $800 million going to Montana to help Tester win, for a power line that we should have been able to build half of that, but it's going to community impact grants, which to me sounds like pork, going into people that might somewhere be located near a power line.
I think Tim Sheehy's going to win. I'm pretty sure Kevin Cramer's going to win re-election in your state. But the Department of Interior, I just want my audience to know, and you know it as a governor, within the Department of Interior is the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They all have impact on the ability to produce energy. The EPA is its own agency. They have permits that produce energy. The Forest Service has land that allows people to do energy. And the Army Corps of Engineers, of course, and the Department of Defense, it's a nightmare to produce energy in the United States. The left wing has made it virtually impossible. Are you winning these lawsuits?
We are, and we've won specifically against the BLM. This is the first administration since Harry Truman. The Biden-Harris first one since Harry Truman didn't hold the lawfully required once a quarter lease sales, so the American public could bid on the opportunity to develop minerals on federal land. They did not hold them. And we sued them in court. We won. And now we're battling lease by lease with them. And again, it's the whole thing is ridiculous. It's like kids in kindergarten who are, they said, 735 bids for leases. They approved 35 after the court ordered them to. What about the other 700? They came back with, well, there was a word misspelled. There was this. I mean, they're actively still engaged, even though we won the lawsuit in trying to prevent development. And by the way, you mentioned in your opening statement of this segment, when we develop resources in North Dakota with horizontal drilling, we can go down 2 miles, over 2, 3, and now 4-mile laterally and pull minerals out from underneath federal land without ever setting foot on that federal land. And the federal government gets a royalty, sometimes as high as 18.5%. We send a check, help reduce the deficit, never touch federal land on the surface. Everybody benefits, and they're suing us, trying to prevent us from sending money to the federal government. That's the upside down world we're in right now.
I really believe, Governor, energy is how we solve the debt, not the deficit. The $35 trillion debt is by quadrupling. I think President Trump was trying to say at the debate, and I want to get your comments on the debate before you go. I think he was trying to say they have gotten back, they being Biden and Harris, have gotten back to the level of domestic energy production I was at when I left in 2021. Now they've gotten back to that. We need to be 4 times as productive as we are right now. And if we are, he didn't say this, I'm saying, if we are, those royalties will eat away at the debt. Why don't people understand this?
Well, I'm so happy you do. You could be a governor of a natural resources state, Hugh, because you get exactly what the opportunity is. And the states, because we take a portion of this, so does Alaska, so does Wyoming, so does Texas. The 5 biggest states together have all created either legacy or permanent funds. Those states have put away $330 billion, just most of that in the last decade doing this. I mean, you start talking about the federal government not only could reduce the debt, then once the debt is paid down, then all of a sudden we could be like Norway and like Saudi Arabia and start building up a sovereign wealth fund. And that's
Governor, we're out of time. Please say hello to my friend Michael Oren if you see him, or to any of the people I've interviewed, like Prime Minister Netanyahu, if you see him. Travel safely. I'm so glad you're there showing American support for the Jewish state, because Israel is the equal of any of our allies, and we have to stand with it, as Doug Burgum is doing. Governor Doug Burgum, thank you for joining me this morning. Very, very early for me, very, very busy for you, and I appreciate Doug Burgum a great deal. Thank you, Governor. You would be forgiven if among this news blizzard, exploding pagers in Hezbollah land, Vice President Harris before the National Association of Black Journalists making like 0 cents on child care and price caps. And there's stuff going on in the House of Representatives. Thank goodness we have Olivia Beavers, one of the best reporters on the House, apolitical, nonpartisan. Olivia, what is going on in the House of Representatives?
Well, I'd say there's been 2 major discussions going on the Hill this week, which is, one, what is the task force, the Trump assassination task force, going to do? How is the House going to handle a second apparent attempt on Donald Trump's life, and in terms of boosting Secret Service funding, and the discussions between Democrats and Republicans on that front. The other is keeping the government funded, which we're about to have a vote on a short-term spending bill that includes the SAVE Act, which is legislation that requires citizens to have proof of citizenship in federal elections. And it's generally backed by Republicans. But
Olivia, I missed a little bit of that. The SAVE Act requires all voters to have citizenship. That needs to be in law?
It requires proof of citizenship in federal elections.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And the problem, though, that Mike Johnson's facing is that he has a few different groups of Republicans who say they oppose his plan. It's not that they oppose the SAVE Act. It's that there are some who will never support what we call a continuing resolution to keep the government funded on a short-term basis. And then there's defense hawks like Chairman Mike Rogers, who has taken issue with the 6-month timeline, which he argues is not. And other kind of defense hawks on the Republican side have argued that they take issue with how it would impact the Pentagon. So over the weekend, Johnson and his leadership team tried to meet with Republicans to try to basically get enough members of his own team on board. We don't believe that he has been able to flip enough votes for this bill to succeed yet. They're bringing it to the floor today. So we could be wrong, but the expectation is that it fails and then they go on to a plan B. What that plan B is, we're not sure, but a lot of Republicans are increasingly just saying they think it's going to be a clean CR, which would upset Mike Johnson's right flank.
Now, are any Democrats expected to vote for the 6-month plus SAVE Act bill?
Jared Golden has said that he will support it, and there have been about 5 Democrats who previously supported the SAVE Act, and but we know that Democratic leadership has been whipping them to change. They want Republicans to sort of have a difficult time, and they basically argue that they think that it's a election year ploy to stick it to Democrats by having them vote on this. It's also a non-starter in the Senate. With Schumer has basically said they're not going to accept it, and they were probably going to send back a clean CR. So the belief is maybe by next week, you're going to possibly have a clash with Johnson and the Senate that could risk a shutdown if the two sides don't agree. But Johnson has a lot at stake in this fight with his right flank, and he also just met with Donald Trump, who has been very loud about his belief that SAVE Act needs to be included.
So, when does funding run out for the federal government if no CR without the SAVE Act, 3 months, 6 months, 3 weeks? When does it run out?
October 1st is when we would see essentially a shutdown.
So the Congress must pass something by October 1st. So Chuck Schumer would rather shut down the government than pass the SAVE Act?
They've argued that, and that's what Republicans want to message on. Democrats would message back that they were playing politics and that it was Republicans, because they're going to send back probably a clean CR. So they're going to argue that it was Republicans who were the ones who shut down the government. In just sort of watching how these fights have played out, both sides, when the shutdowns do tend to happen, try to message that the other side is to blame, but we really don't know who the blame is actually going to fall on until.
Oh, I do. If you object, obviously you don't get to say this, Olivia. If Chuck Schumer won't send back a CR with the SAVE Act, that's because he doesn't want a law forbidding people from voting who do not in federal elections who do not have ID. That's why. Because they're not disagreeing on the levels, are they?
I think there is some disagreement on the top lines, but generally, I think that the SAVE Act is the big hurdle for Democrats versus Republicans in this short term.
So what time is the vote on the House bill today?
I need to double check that. I can look it up right now, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
But it's today.
It's today, yes.
Joined by Congressman Michael Waltz of Florida's 6th Congressional District. He serves in Congress on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the House Intel Committee, the House Armed Services Committee, and on the Select Task Force on the now 2 assassination attempts on President Trump. I'll come to that last thing after I first get the Congressman's reaction to the exploding pagers on Hezbollah's belts and in their pockets, Congressman. How surprising a reach is that?
I think there's a couple of key takeaways. I was just looking at the New York Times headline that typical shouldn't be surprising. They're like, yeah, this was a tactical success, but strategically shoulder shrug, no big deal. That was basically the headlines in the New York Times. I think this was an incredibly strategic move, masterful operation from the Israelis. And it points to a couple of things. One, I think it bought the Israelis time in terms of a northern front. Two, the psychological operations, which as a Green Beret, I deeply appreciate. Who in Hezbollah is going to trust any of their communications? Who in Hezbollah is going to trust any of their supply chains that the Israelis can't intercept it and tamper with it, whether it's rockets, missiles, or pagers? And then from a recruiting standpoint, who the hell would want to join Hezbollah right now and get their hand, their face, their eye blown off? I look, we've all been waiting, Hugh, for that vaunted Iranian counterattack. uh, Biden and Harris have been kind of patting themselves on the back as they literally move our Navy from the Pacific back to the Middle East. So much for the pivot to the Pacific. It's not Biden and Harris that's deterring Iran and preventing them from attacking. It's Israel. It is
Yeah, I
making
actually think
Hania
Bibi
go boom in
Netanyahu.
Tehran, and it's these types of operations that both Iran and Hezbollah have gotten the message loud and clear, literally, that they're going to pay, and that's how deterrence works in the Middle East.
Yes, it is, and I think Bibi Netanyahu, whatever anyone thinks of him, is the equal of any leader the West has right now in establishing deterrence. And maybe he did that with Yoav Gallant, the defense minister's concurrence, or over his objection. There may be changes in that government. I don't know. But, Congressman, at the debate, Kamala Harris said there were no American military forces in combat zones. Your reaction to that?
Yeah, I about fell out of my chair. My phone started blowing up from special operators and sailors that are literally were being fired at that very week. Hugh, I just met with a special operations unit last Friday that's issued 16 Purple Heart on their last tour. And so either she is just an ignorant wallflower that has no idea what's going on, or she's at the table and she's lying. Which is it? You don't get both. Same with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and same with every other disastrous foreign policy and national security decision that Biden's made, and she's been a part of it. Hugh, I worked in a White House, in the Bush White House. The vice president is the first and the last to speak at a National Security Council. So she's been at the table, and she, again, ignorant or or misleading. Which is it?
Lying, I think. I think she had to lie. I don't know how you don't know that everyone in the Naval Task Force in either the Med or the Gulf are getting combat badges and
Ribbons.
pay.
Yeah.
Ribbons. Congressman, let me turn to the assassination attempt, the second. I wonder if you think the Secret Service succeeded there. I've heard people say, well, they got the shooter before the shooter got a shot off at the president, but there was no perimeter, and the Secret Service returned fire and they didn't hit him. First, very technical question, because I don't know anything about guns. Could a handgun, should a handgun fire hit a sniper in a blind like that from the distance at which the Secret Service was?
Yeah, I've asked them why the bubble, which are moving in golf carts, didn't have a long gun with them. So that's just an outstanding question. One of the reasons the kind of advanced bubble was checking that particular fence line was that's where the paparazzi and photographers are known to try to hang out. On the perimeter, at least what the service is telling us is that for OTRs, for off the record movements, because they tend to be snap decisions, that they don't have time to do the advance. But my pushback is, look, I mean, President Trump plays golf at certain places, and certainly when he's in Palm Beach, he's going to go to his club. So, and we're seeing creative use of drones all over the world now. Why we can't have a drone as part of that advanced bubble is another outstanding question, Hugh. But I think there's a bigger issue here, twofold. One, the service has got to get out of this regimented, hey, you're a former president, you get this. You know, you're a current president, you get that. President Trump isn't Jimmy Carter. We've got to get out of that rigid methodology. It needs to be threat-based resource decisions. And we haven't seen a former or current president have this type of threats, especially when you layer on the Iranian threats in modern American history. And on the Iranian threats, look, we've had multiple plots now intercepted, and they're still trying, not just for Trump, but for half of his cabinet, Pompeo, O'Brien, Hook, General Milley. That's totally unacceptable. And you haven't heard a peep from Biden, Harris, Blinken, any of them in terms of consequences for an adversary trying to assassinate American officials. And that's just inviting more, in my view. It's this concessions appeasement approach this administration has had towards Iran that you want to talk about election interference or pulling the rug out from our democracy and our republic. That's it. And then finally, the rhetoric has just got to stop. And I know you've been talking a lot about that, but clearly people are believing Harris and Biden when they say, by any means necessary, Trump has to be stopped. And they are taking that to a literal and deadly end. And one American's dead because of it. It's got to stop.
Vice President Harris took some questions at the National Association of Black Journalists on Monday night. One of her answers and questions was this one: cut 21 for Congressman Walz, please.
Do you have full confidence in the Secret Service to protect all of you?
I do.
You feel safe for you and your family?
I do. But, I mean, you can go back to Ohio. Not everybody has Secret Service. And there are far too many people in our country right now who are not feeling safe. I mean, I look at Project 2025, and I look at, like the Don't Say Gay laws coming out of Florida. Members of the LGBTQ community don't feel safe right now.
All right, Congressman Walz, what do you make of that answer? Project 2025, LGBTQ. It's a question about the Secret Service. I'm afraid she's a jukebox with 6 answers, and they're all bad.
Yeah, and then victim blaming, really. So that's as a aspiring commander in chief, that's where you're going to go. The real question is the Secret Service allocating its resources appropriately? Is it stuck in this old model, or is it doing it according to the threats? And do they have the resources they need in this type of environment? Fair question. And that was an opportunity for her to say, if she wants to say both sides, fine. Both sides, everybody, all Americans, tamp down the rhetoric. There is no place for political violence. As the ranking member of our assassination committee, a Democrat, came right out the gate and said, Jason Crow. So, it's just an absolute lack of leadership, and to pivot into victim blame and take a political swipe. It's just unacceptable and sad.
Congressman, you're a Green Beret. I'm a lawyer. I believe in proximate cause. I blame shooters or would-be shooters. I don't blame rhetoric. But one rule is also it. If you're going to blame rhetoric, blame everybody's rhetoric or nobody's rhetoric. And Democrats and elite media are not doing that. Last question. That debate last week, what a complete fiasco. Not one question about China. Do you think that was because of Disney having parks there?
Yeah, well, I think we have so many institutions, and frankly, many of them are left-leaning, that are drunk on Chinese dollars, from BlackRock to Disney to all types of studios that are willing to really look the other way as they sell into a brutal dictatorship. And so, take it back around to this Hezbollah a hit that the Israelis just carried out. Supply chains matter. And if the Israelis can interject something into a pager, I guarantee you China is trying to interject, whether it's chips, certain types of materials, engine parts, you name it, into our systems, cranes, Chinese cranes running on Chinese software in all of our ports. We can go down the painful list. And
boy, that you're the first person to bring that up. That's a remarkable observation. You're the first person. Supply chains go both ways. What the Israelis did to Hezbollah can be done to us by the CCP. I want to remind everyone, if you happen to have an iPhone, I'm coming up. I'm going to talk with Christine Rosen about her book, The Extinction of Experience, which you should buy and read. I think it is the equivalent of Alan Bloom's The Closing of the American Mind in 1987. It is that impactful. You want to use your iPhone wisely. You want to make sure you do not act in a profligate manner about screens and downloads and stuff like that with your children. and you want the right apps, not the wrong apps. One of the apps you want is the Salem News Channel app. You can watch me if you're not driving anywhere. If you're driving, just listen to the radio. I'm on from Maine to Southern California and from the Canadian border down to Key West, Florida. I'm on all over Canada and listen to in Israel and around the world via HughHewitt.com. If you want every minute of every hour of every show, you have to join the universe. And if you want the air check, that's only on the universe. The air check is when after every show, Dwayne and I sit down and we talk about the show and we do an air check with each other. And that's only available to subscribers, as is the subtext, which I read every day. I don't have the time sometimes, the bandwidth to simply respond to everyone, but I read every comment that comes in over the subtext, which is only available if you join the universe. That costs more, but that makes you part of our merry band of tribbles. And I am glad to have you there. I always love your feedback. It is important to the show. Dwayne likes it as well. I remind you as well, if you haven't got that much time, one senator only listens to my podcast. They have told me that. Don't have time for the universe, don't have time for the full show, can't watch you on the Salem News Channel. I do, however, listen to Highly Concentrated Hugh every day, which is available at Apple, at iTunes. It's available at Spotify, on Salem Podcast Network. Wherever there are podcasts, you can find Highly Concentrated Hugh, and that's where I take the most important stuff like Doug Burgum, or my Michael Waltz interview, or my interview with Mary Catherine Ham, smash it all together, put it into a podcast. There are some ads on that. The universe is ad-free. But again, we make an array of stuff available to you, and I really want to encourage you to download the Salem News Channel app. Give us a look. All right, we look good. We do look good. I think we always look good. Whether it's Studio North, Studio Beltway, Studio West, I move around the country a lot. Feel free to move around the country is my motto, because you only learn if you stay in the Beltway, which is my home. Right, I'm a Virginia voter. I'm a Virginia citizen. If you stay in the Beltway, you have no idea what's going on in the country. And that's why the Battleground Tour is coming up as well, right before the election. Now, the new Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll puts Trump up 3 in Georgia. I think he's probably up by 5, 7. The new poll that Martha McCollum announced yesterday. Can we go back to that, cut number 36? This is with Lee Carter talking to Martha McCollum yesterday about the numbers in Pennsylvania.
I found this fascinating. Trump is leading with Hispanic voters by 8% in Pennsylvania. And I don't think we've ever seen a Republican beating the Democrat. Usually it's, how much are they eroding the lead of Hispanic voters? But he's ahead with Hispanic voters in Pennsylvania. I don't know how large, of a voter group that is in Pennsylvania.
It's a really interesting trend that we're starting to see. More and more Hispanic voters are going for Donald Trump. In many ways,
it's a large group. I don't have a lot of time. It's a large group. It's a decisive group. I think Trump's going to win this election. I will have a column out tomorrow on Fox News about why I am voting for Trump and why you should vote for Trump. And I hope it's persuasive. Christine Rosen is a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. She is the author of an incredible new book, The Extinction of Experience. I read it Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I interviewed Christine on Monday. All of the interview, unbroken, is available at Highly Concentrated You podcast. It's available if you want to watch it on my YouTube channel. So go to Hugh Hewitt and YouTube and roll back through some of the YouTubes. It's on Monday. So that's when we posted the whole video on the YouTube channel. And I want to play for you another portion of it. And I want to urge you to go and buy the book. I've already given away my copy of The Extinction of Experience. And The Extinction of Experience is never going to come back to me, even though I marked it up so heavily, because it's compelling, addictive reading, just like your cell phone is. Here's part 3 of my interview with Christine Rosen on The Extinction of Experience. That is, by the way, I want people to understand, this is not a judgmental book. I appreciate the tone throughout. It's an observational book. It does not condemn anyone. And I'm glad, because I want to give it to my kids and their spouses, and all my kids and all their spouses, and all of my friends, and I am too. We're busy documenting our lives now in a way that we never did before. And we take a selfie and we send it to the family text chain. Here's we are. And that's fine. But you're right to point out it's ubiquitous. Everybody does it all the time. What is driving that? Christine Rosen? Just the ability of the technology, or what is the need that's being met?
So the need that's being met is a very deeply human one to connect. And the technologists who design these platforms and tools have on staff lots of people who've studied behavioral psychology and human psychology for a reason. They know what motivates humans to react. The problem is that the reaction is what matters, not whether it's positive, whether it's negative, whether it's good for you and your family or bad for you and your family. We see this in our politics. Anger and fear will bring people back again and again to a platform. Puppies and kittens, not so much. There's a weird moral neutrality built into these platforms that I think is quite problematic when you start relying on them as replacements for the human interaction. So, you sending pictures to a family text chain, that is the way that the technology was originally devised, and it's sort of how it was advertised to all of us. And I don't see any harm in that. I would see harm if you could go see your children or grandchildren in person, but you started to find it a lot more convenient and easy to just FaceTime call them. Because one of the things about human experience that's worth remembering is that it is difficult to leave your house, to go see someone who's sick, take care of them, to do all of those things. It is much easier to feel like you've helped someone or reached out to them, but all you've had to do is press a button or swipe something on your screen. So the performative aspect of it worries me for other reasons. I worry about generations of American children thinking they have to perform every emotion, posting every emotion. You start to perform for the camera in a way that I think earlier generations, certainly mine, who didn't grow up with this stuff, never had to do. So it's very natural for them in a way that does worry me.
I'm very glad my high school years are not documented. But I also want to say there's a joke. There's a joke out there that people say, I'm right here, when they're talking about, I'm standing here. Well, that has a corollary in the virtual world. And on debate night last week, when the vice president said there are no Americans serving in combat, a half dozen Marines or soldiers who are in combat were filming themselves watching the debate. And they said, where the F are we? I mean, it was an instant explosive moment. And they posted it, which was probably not a good idea and probably got them in trouble with their command sergeant major. And now everyone's seen it because Elon Musk retweeted it. So there's no sense in denying that it's out there. What they wanted to say is, we are in a combat zone, Madam Vice President. So I understand that impulse. We're right here impulse. But a lot of it is, I'm doing this impulse. I never needed anyone. I didn't want my parents to know what I was doing.
Well, this is a fascinating change, right? Because not only do the kids forget that they can be tracked and surveyed as well as while they're performing their lives, but the parents also want to track and survey their kids at a level that those of us who grew up being told come home when the streetlights come back on now really appreciate. And so I think that again, there's a whole theme of safety and risk aversion that our technologies encourage. Again, the technology doesn't cause this, but it does exacerbate human tendencies, and it does then in our daily interactions with it, because we spend so much time staring at our phones or staring at screens, we can't not be changed by it. So the question is, are those changes having a detrimental effect both individually and more broadly? And I think the expectation of surveillance and performance are two things that I worry will have implications for a country whose founding principles are about freedom, about some risk taking. Really, our risk taking now is all vicarious. We watch a lot of other people do risky things and do less of them ourselves, unless we happen to be that minority that pursues that kind of adventure.
I did not know until I read this book that there's a website. Let's pause it there. We'll get more of this out later. There are a couple of things I got to do in the news. First of all, former President Trump came out for the return of the state and local income tax deduction. I personally opposed the elimination of this deduction vociferously at length on air with Kevin McCarthy and with Kevin Brady, then the leader of the House for the Republicans and the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. Over and over again, I told them you can't get rid of the state and local tax deduction. It's not fair. Again, this Christine Rosen's book has a lot about fairness in it. It's unequitable to people who built their lives in blue state. All right? That's the bottom line. We make our life choices early. We settle somewhere and we decide, okay, I'm going to raise my family here. I'm going to buy a house here. I know what the taxes are. I can at least deduct those taxes on my federal income, and then you make an economic decision. People make 20 and 30-year housing decisions when they do that. For example, my friend Andrew Del Rey, a sponsor of this show, andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. Yesterday, he wrote me about the 20-year mortgage rate. 20-year mortgage rate has come down dramatically. If you're not a 30-year mortgage rate, but the 20-year mortgage rate. So if you're buying a house or you want to refinance a house and get money out, the 20-year might be the way to go. But it's still a 20-year commitment. Many people prior to 2017 made 20 and 30-year commitments to buy a home on the assumption that their property taxes would be deductible and that their state income taxes would be deductible. And the 2017 law changed that. It was a mistake. It was a political mistake, by the way. Republicans got wiped out primarily in the blue states because voters were necessarily and rightly angry that the Republicans paid no attention to them. Kevin Brady said, why should Texas subsidize California? And the answer is because they've always done it that way. Voters, citizens make life choices. So Donald Trump came out yesterday and said, I want to get rid of the state and local tax deduction limit, or at least raise it. He's right. He's right. He's right. Just like he's right on abortion belonging to the states, just like he is right on closing the border, he's right. Vote for him. Voting is open in Pennsylvania. I want my Keystone State voters to get out. And if you needed more persuasion, you just got to listen to the word salad that Kamala Harris threw at the National Association of Black Journalists on Monday night, cut number 22.
Are they better off now than they were 4 years ago?
So when we came into, well, first of all, let me just say it is good to be with the National Association of Black Journalists, and I thank you for the work you do and that your members do every day. It is very important that we ensure that this organization and your members always have the resources and the platforms to deliver the voices that must be heard. So I thank you for hosting me today. 4 years ago, when we came in during the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. We came in during the worst public health epidemic in centuries. We came in after the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And a lot of it due in large part to the mismanagement by the former president.
Can we stop right there? The largest attack on our democracy was 9/11. It remains 9/11. She apparently has forgotten 9/11. The highest unemployment was because governors had closed their states and had not reopened them soon enough. Governors in Michigan, governors in California, governors in New York, blue states. Governors in red states like Ron DeSantis had already reopened their economies. Those were not unemployment numbers. Those were shutdown numbers. Moreover, the president did not mismanage COVID. He launched Operation Warp Speed, which produced the vaccine, which these people mangled the rollout of. And most of our economic woes came because they spent $5 trillion we did not have. Again, go listen to the Ruthless podcast yesterday. Stephen Moore, the economist extraordinaire, was a guest of John Ashcroft, I believe. And the conversation is so illuminating about the effects of the Trump economic miracle, the Tax Act of 2017. She does not know. She cannot understand how the economy works. If she did, she wouldn't filibuster on her support for reparations. Cut 25.
Would you, as president, take executive action to create this commission, or do you believe that it should happen in Congress?
Well, first of all, as you mentioned, Sheila Jackson Lee, she was an extraordinary leader who we just recently lost, and she was a friend and a real champion for so many issues. So I feel compelled to say that about her. On the issue of what we need to do going forward, look, first of all, we just need to speak truth about history in spite of the fact that some people would try and erase history. and try and teach
The
us
question's
to
about
live.
reparations. Will you do reparations via an executive order, or will you do it via legislation? She hadn't answered that yet. She paid homage to someone. That's fine. Keep going.
We need to speak truth about the generational impact of our history in terms of the generational impact of slavery, the generational impact of redlining, of Jim Crow law. I could go on and on and on. These are facts that have had impact. And we need to speak truth about it. And we need to
All right,
truth
speak
about
truth
it
about it, but we'll come back. Reparations was the question. Will we get an answer? I don't know. You may have to listen to Dwayne's World today because I have one segment left and not enough time for all the crazy stuff she said at the NABJ. Got to play for you Mark Halperin interviewing a focus group yesterday, cut number 33.
I want to ask you about Vice President Harris first. And I want you to tell me in one or two words what your biggest worry is. If she's elected president, Kim.
Her inexperience.
Sue.
She will be ramroded
Yep,
in Washington.
Just one or two.
Far left policies.
Okay. Ellen.
Unknown policies.
Okay. Steve.
Too liberal.
Okay. Nick.
Too establishment.
Mark.
Unproven.
Yeah. Lauren.
Far left.
Okay. And Jamie.
Unserious.
You see, Halperin's focus group is undecided voters in swing states. He's good at that. And like Luntz does good focus groups. That's on that. They must have heard her filibustering reparations. Can we go back to her answer on whether or not she's going to support reparations, either via executive order or in congressional legislation? It's cut number 25. We interrupted it. Maybe we have to go to the middle. Yeah, go to the middle of it because we played.
And frankly, I think that we, and part of that is studying it to figure out exactly what we need to do. But part of what we can do right now is, for example, what I'm talking about in terms of building an opportunity economy, which is addressing explicitly the obstacles that historically and currently exist and dealing with them. Student loan debt, medical debt, bias in home appraisals, what we need to do in terms of dealing with an issue that I have championed for years, black maternal mortality, which is the fact that black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in connection with childbirth than other women.
Okay, so what we have is a word salad. She does not answer about reparations. Just one more. She's asked about guns. Cut 28.
So, first of all, yes, I am a gun owner, and Tim Walz is a gun owner, and we're not trying to take anybody's guns away from them. But we do need an assault weapons ban.
Okay, they're going to do the mandatory buyback. Okay, one more. Dwayne, you've got all this on Dwayne's World, right? All of these cut. Okay, one more. Cut number 27, an admission against interest by the vice president who's a jukebox.
We grew up, our parents, where they had the ability to somehow believe the American dream was attainable. Not so much for younger working people. And I recognize
All right,
that.
the jukebox. No answer. No answer. It's the same 6 bad answers that are non-responsive to the questions about inflation under Biden-Harris, about reparations, about gun mandatory buyback. It'll be on Dwayne's World. I don't have time. We'll talk about it on the air check a little bit afterward. Can't get the air check unless you're a subscriber to the universe. So you might want to consider that's the most important investment you can make.